Hey everybody, this is Mr. Marshall here for another review. This one's going to be on science and technology, so it's going to start from all the way at the beginning of the colonial period and then go through everything all the way up until we got like rocket ships and stuff that you see here. Whenever you guys see these two animations, that means that the information is useful in the regions in some way. So over here it's going to be good for essays. If you see the little star, it's going to be good for multiple choice. So these are just a bunch of inventions that have been throughout our entire history. And some of them are more important than others. Like the big ones that you see here is definitely the cotton gin, the telegraph, the car, the light bulb. Like those are some of like the bigger ones. You know, the others definitely have a huge impact. You just don't see them as often on the regions. So the cotton gin was so particularly big because that's what made slavery so economically viable. You know, before the cotton gin you had to pick through everything like with your individual fingers and it just took forever. You know, like it's also mind-numbing just sitting there picking seeds out of a ball of cotton. With the cotton gin you can go through it like 600 times faster, and it actually made it so that you can make money on it. Without the cotton gin we probably wouldn't have had slavery, or it would have died off pretty quick. And then once you get into, you know, the steamboat, you have a whole lot of trade increasing, especially along the canals like the Erie Canal. Eventually you get into sleeping cars for trains, you get into streetcars, and once you start getting into electric light bulbs and the gasoline powered car, you really start to see an explosion in the cities. You know, the light bulb was just like, oh my god, I can actually do things after dark. It was crazy. And then the car not only allowed for a lot of transportation, but it changed the way people live. Like that's where you start to get the suburbs. So these are just like certain types of transportation that kind of go all through. Airplanes aren't on here obviously, but we're really focusing right now on the roads, the canals, and the railroads. So when it comes to roads, the big things about them was connecting all the different colonies together, particularly for a post office, which was like revolutionary at the time. And also so that, you know, the different colonies can, you know, trade and communicate and, you know, make sure that everybody's on the same page with making laws and everything. When it comes to canals, the Regents loves the Erie Canal because it's in New York State. You know, it connects the the city of Buffalo all the way over to Albany. You know, and that's what allowed New York City to become so incredibly huge, because it goes from, I mean, it was big. I mean, it's like the third best natural harbor in the world. But then you can go from New York City up the Hudson River, through the canal to the Great Lakes, and it just opens up a whole huge amount of territory. And New York City just explodes once after it's finished. And then once you get railroads, that's even better, because now you can go all over the place. You know, and even though railroads aren't super fast, they never have to stop, and they can carry huge amounts of material in terms of weight. So, and I mean, we still use railroads all the time today. You know, you guys are probably taking the train down to the city. So this is just a picture of one of the canals. And then right here you have one of the old-time railroads. You know, the big huge smokestack from so much coal being burnt. Alright, so now we start getting into the stuff that the Regents really starts to take a look into. And the Industrial Revolution is huge. You know, partially because you got the Civil War, so everybody starts to industrialize because they all want rifles. The railroad's huge in terms of moving different supplies around. And that's where we start to see a lot of this industry, where we start to see a lot of this technology coming out. And right after the Civil War, you start to see transcontinental railroads, you know, linking the East and the West together, you know, getting everybody moving out there, opening up all this new land, you know, and then that's shortly after that you start getting people moving out to California in like huge amounts and all sorts of different things. Eventually, Henry Ford comes along and creates the assembly line, and that revolutionizes everything. Because beforehand, if you wanted a car, you literally would just get 6 guys in a room with a whole bunch of pieces, just building it, and it was like 2 days to make a car. So like in a week, you get what, like 3, maybe 4 of them? With an assembly line, you're pumping out a new car every 14 seconds. And the more you have of something like that, the cheaper you're able to sell it for. So it actually made it so that everybody was able to afford cars. You know, without the assembly line, that never would have actually happened. You know, and now that they have cars, they start having suburban life. You know, that's what allows people to start living farther and farther away from where they work, and that's how you get that whole white flight thing that we talked about in class. So this is one of those like huge suburbs that originally started out. This is one of the old Levitt towns. Then after the Industrial Revolution, we start getting into the World Wars. You got the 20s, and then you have the Manhattan Project, which is where the atomic bomb comes out, which is just a revolutionary piece of technology. Partially because it's an atomic bomb. I mean, it's the biggest bomb that was just boom. But also because that's one of the main reasons that the Cold War gets going, with the whole brinkmanship thing, and the two superpowers, the USSR and the US kind of posturing to each other throughout the entire Cold War. And then the space race gets started when the Soviet Union launches Sputnik. Even though it was only the size of a basketball and all it did was like blink one little tiny light, people flipped out. And that's when you start to see a whole lot of funding get pushed into education, mainly into math and science. And the United States creates NASA, and everybody goes nuts over the space race, particularly with putting a man on the moon, with, proving that we're better than everybody else in the Cold War. This last one that you see here, the Strategic Defense Initiative, I actually find pretty funny. They nicknamed it Star Wars, and I'm going to show you a picture right here. There you go. That's Sputnik. But this was the idea for Star Wars, because they were so worried about these nuclear weapons, the A-bomb, the H-bomb being launched, that they tried to figure out a way that satellites could shoot lasers to take out missiles, and they nicknamed it Star Wars. They never actually got it going, but it was one of those things that they put a whole lot of money into because they were so worried about what could possibly happen. And this is some of the more modern stuff. The most recent piece of technology that's really had a huge impact on everyone's life, particularly you guys, is computers. Because the amount of information that shoots all over the place now is just incredible. It's particularly with the smartphones that you guys have. Beforehand, I mean, just think about it. The GPS on the phone alone is amazing. Like, you don't actually really need to look up directions. Like, how many of you guys have even looked at a road map? You just plug in the address and then bam, you're on your way. The next one down, you got fossil fuels. They started to be used during the Industrial Revolution. That's when we start to take a look at like coal. And then we start making the move from coal over to oil. And oil is what we use most right now. That's what we have the whole dependence on. But a lot of people are talking about possibly moving over to nuclear power, like the Indian Point power plant, because it's supposed to be a lot cleaner. It's supposed to not actually run out, but a lot of people are really worried about it because of the threat of nuclear accidents, like 3 Mile Island. When the earthquake happened off the coast of Japan, it caused a lot of problems because it cracked one of the nuclear reactors that was on their coast. And all this nuclear waste, this radioactive waste, has to be put somewhere, and what do you really do with it? So that's one of the things that's really going on right now. You also have the problem of all these different types of pollution, because it can cause cancer, respiratory disease, and especially global warming, which is the whole climate change that you guys hear about it every so often, particularly when people are trying to get elected, on whether or not they actually believe in global warming, and there's a bunch of scientists that kind of argue back and forth. So people haven't really determined exactly how global warming affects everyone, but the amount of pollution that we put out is definitely there. And then the acid rain does come up sometimes on the regions, more often in terms of with how technology affects people, and that's just really rain that has a different pH level and it causes damage to plants. So that's it for this review. It's just a real quick thing on science and technology. Make sure you guys are studying for the Regents, and good luck. I hope you do well.